I was 34 years old when I found a box in my mother's closet that stopped me breathing for a full minute. Not because of what was inside it, because of what wasn't. There were birthday cards for my sister going back to 1987. Report cards, ballet recital programs, a lock of hair in a tiny envelope with her name written in my mother's handwriting. I stood in that closet for a long time going through every single item. I went through the whole box twice. And then I sat down on the floor of my mother's house and I faced something I had been running from for 34 years. My name was not in that box. Not once. Not a single piece of paper, not a single photograph, not a single receipt that proved I had ever existed in that house as someone worth remembering. And what I did with that moment, what I chose to do instead of falling apart, is the reason I'm telling you this story today. My name is Waverly Odom. I grew up in Asheville, North Carolina, in a blue house on a street called Persimmon Drive, in a family where love was not rationed equally. I did not understand that as a child. Children do not come into the world with a measuring cup. They assume that whatever portion they receive is the standard portion, that whatever temperature exists in their home is the temperature of all homes. It took me a long time to understand that what I had grown up inside was not normal. It was not the way families were supposed to work. It was a system that had been built, piece by piece, before I was even born, and I had been inserted into it not as a daughter, but as a footnote. My mother's name was Lorraine. She was a tall woman with good posture and a firm handshake, the kind of woman other women described as put together. She sang in the church choir every Sunday and brought casseroles to neighbors after funerals and volunteered at the elementary school book fair every October without fail. She was generous with strangers in a way she never quite managed to be with me. My father, Gerald, worked in insurance. He was not a hard man. He was a soft man. Soft in the way that would get soft when it has been sitting in water too long. The structure is there, but you cannot put any weight on it. He had opinions, but never kept them. He had instincts, but always deferred to my mother's louder ones. He loved me, I think, in the way that people love things they have been told not to make a fuss over. My sister Brianna was 2 years older than me. She was the first child, the wanted child, the child my mother had planned for and decorated a nursery for and documented in 4 separate photo albums before she turned 3. Brianna was bright and loud and easy to love out loud, the kind of person who fills a room without trying and empties it a little when she leaves. My mother and Brianna had a relationship that operated at a frequency I was never tuned to. They laughed at things together that I never understood were funny. They had inside references from before I was born, shorthand I was never taught, a whole private language built over the 2 years they had existed as a family of 3 before I arrived and complicated the math. I did not know any of this when I was small. I only knew that when my mother looked at Brianna, something in her face went soft and easy. And when she looked at me, she looked like a woman who was trying to remember if she had left the stove on. The first memory I have of understanding my place is from when I was 6 years old. Brianna's 8th birthday party. 19 kids from her class, a Barbie cake with pink frosting, streamers in every doorway, a piñata my father had driven 40 minutes to buy from a party supply store in the next town. My mother had been planning that party for 6 weeks. I know because I had watched her plan it. The lists on the refrigerator, the phone calls in the evening, the careful way she wrote out the invitations in her best handwriting at the kitchen table while I sat across from her doing a puzzle. At some point during that party, in the middle of the singing and the cake and the opening of gifts, I tugged my mother's sleeve and told her my stomach hurt. She looked down at me. And then she looked back at the room full of children and the birthday cake and my sister laughing with her friends, and she made a calculation that took less than 2 seconds. "Go lie down," she said. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "Let me feel your forehead." Not even, "We'll talk after the party." "Go lie down." I went to my room and I lay on my bed and I listened to the party through the wall. The singing, the laughing, the sound of wrapping paper being torn. I was 6 years old and my stomach genuinely hurt and no one came to check on me. Not once. Not during the party, not after the guests left, not at dinner. I fell asleep eventually. When I woke up, the house was quiet. The streamers were still in the doorways. There was a piece of birthday cake on the counter wrapped in plastic wrap with Brianna's name on the little piece of tape holding it closed. There was no peace for me. I ate crackers from the pantry standing up in the kitchen in the dark, and I went back to bed. I was 6 years old. I did not cry. I did not know yet that I was allowed to. Here is what I want you to understand about growing up invisible inside a family that is visible to the world. Nobody sees it. That is the nature of it. My mother was beloved in our neighborhood. She was the woman who organized the block association and remembered everyone's birthday and kept an extra key for 3 different neighbors in case of emergencies. People spoke about her with genuine warmth. Teachers at our school knew her by name and smiled when they said it. And in that same house, in that same life, she raised a daughter she had mentally filed under. Not my priority. There was never a scene. She never said anything unforgivable. She never raised her hand or raised her voice, or did any of the things that would have made the story simple to understand from the outside. What she did was quieter and in some ways harder to carry, because quiet things cannot be pointed to. She forgot to order me a graduation gown in 8th grade. She remembered Brianna's gown for her 8th grade graduation 2 years earlier. I know because I had been there watching. Mine simply did not get ordered. I found out 3 days before the ceremony when I asked where mine was, and my mother looked at me with genuine, unperformed surprise. The kind of surprise that told me she had not thought about it once. Not in the weeks leading up to it. Not at all. She ordered it rush delivery, and it arrived the morning of the ceremony. It was 2 inches too short because she had guessed my height instead of measuring. In every photograph from my 8th grade graduation, I am tugging the hem. She missed my junior year piano recital because she had a church auxiliary meeting. She had come to Brianna's every year without exception. She never once hung my school photos on the living room wall. Brianna's were there from kindergarten through 12th grade, a complete visual record of her growing up, framed in matching dark wood frames my mother had ordered from a catalog. My school photos lived in an envelope in the kitchen junk drawer alongside expired coupons and a broken watch and a set of keys that no one could identify. I found them there one afternoon when I was 15 and I stood in the kitchen with the envelope in my hand looking at years of my own face. 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th, 6th, 7th. All of them in the same envelope. None of them framed, none of them chosen, none of them considered worth the $12 a frame would have cost. I put the envelope back. I went to my room. I sat at my desk and I opened the notebook I had started keeping that year and I wrote the date in one sentence. Today I found out what I am worth to her in square footage. I left Asheville 2 weeks after my 18th birthday on a scholarship to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I was the first person in my immediate family to attend a 4-year university. My mother did not throw me a going-away dinner. She said she was tired from Brianna's engagement party. Brianna had gotten engaged at 20 that summer to a man named Prescott who sold pharmaceutical equipment and had a loud, easy laugh. The whole family had celebrated for a weekend. My father drove me to campus. 2 hours on I-26, radio country station, windows cracked. He helped me carry my bags to my dorm room. When he was leaving, he stood in the doorway of my room for a moment and looked at me with an expression I had not seen on his face before. Something between guilt and pride and an inability to say either one. He said, "You are going to be fine." I nodded. He said, "You were always the one I didn't worry about." I did not say what I wanted to say, which was, "I know." That was the problem. He drove away. I sat on my dorm bed and I looked at the bare walls and the empty desk and the window that faced a courtyard full of other students moving in with their families. Mothers arranging shelves, fathers assembling desk chairs. Everyone in motion around some shared project of getting settled. I arranged my own shelves. I assembled my own desk chair. I put a photograph of my 4th grade teacher, Mrs. Adeyemi, on the corner of my desk. She was the first adult in my life who had treated my ideas like they deserved to exist. I had carried her photograph for 4 years by then. The photograph went everywhere I did for the next 16 years. I studied communications. I was not the loudest student in any room, but I was the most prepared. Always. Preparation was the thing I could control, and I controlled it completely. While other students stayed out late and slept through morning lectures, I was at my desk at 6 a.m. with highlighters and a cup of coffee working through material that was not due for another week. Not because I was anxious. Because I had learned early that the only reliable thing in the world was work you had already done. No one could take it back. No one could forget to frame it. Junior year, I interned at a public radio station in Durham. Unpaid, 20 hours a week on top of a full course load and a waitressing job that paid my rent. I wrote copy, I did research, I sat in on every editorial meeting I was allowed to attend and several I was not technically invited to but walked into quietly, and no one asked me to leave. By senior year, I was producing 2 segments a week under my own name. By the time I graduated, with honors, with a commendation from the journalism department, with a letter of recommendation from the station's executive producer that she told me was the strongest she had written in 11 years, I had a job offer waiting. My mother came to graduation. She and my father sat in the bleachers with Brianna and Prescott and a cousin named Theodora, who had driven up from Charlotte. After the ceremony, they took me to lunch at a chain restaurant near campus. My mother ordered the salmon. The conversation over lunch was mostly about Brianna and Prescott's house hunt. I had graduated with honors from a 4-year university on a full scholarship while working a job and an unpaid internship simultaneously and producing professional radio content under my own name. The lunch was 45 minutes. We tipped 15%. My mother asked for a box for her leftover salmon. I drove back to my apartment alone and I sat at my desk and I looked at Mrs. Adeyemi's photograph for a long time. Then I got back to work. The years that followed were not glamorous. They were not a movie montage of quick wins and sudden recognition. They were long and quiet and full of the kind of effort that does not look like effort because it has become so habitual it simply looks like breathing. I worked at the Durham station for 3 years. Then I moved to a larger market in Atlanta. Then to Washington, D.C., where I spent 4 years as a producer at a national public radio affiliate and where I learned, slowly and then all at once, that the things I was good at were genuinely uncommon. That not everyone could write a script that made a listener pull over their car. That not everyone could take a complicated story about policy or community or loss and find the single human thread running through it that made the whole thing feel personal. I had been doing that my whole life. Finding the single thread. Following it carefully. Refusing to let go. By the time I was 32, I was the executive producer of a nationally syndicated radio documentary series called Ground Level, stories about ordinary Americans in extraordinary circumstances. We had 4 million listeners. We had won 3 Peabody Awards, which are the highest honor in broadcast journalism, the kind of award that makes people in the industry stop and look at your name differently. My mother did not know what a Peabody Award was. When I called home and mentioned it, she said, "Is that like an Emmy?" I said it was actually considered more prestigious. She said, "Well, Brianna and Prescott are looking at a lake house. Do you think a lake house is a good investment?" I said I didn't know much about real estate. I got off the phone, sat at my desk, and added the Peabody to the list in my notebook. The list had been running since I was 15. It was 4 notebooks long now. The box in my mother's closet. I was home for Thanksgiving. My father had been having some heart irregularities, and I had driven down from D.C. to spend a few days and make sure the house was in order. My mother had a doctor's appointment the second morning I was there, and I offered to straighten up the guest room closet while she was gone, which had been overflowing with boxes for years. I worked through the boxes methodically. Old tax documents, holiday decorations, a broken humidifier still in its original box. And then, on the 3rd shelf from the top, pushed to the back behind a stack of folded tablecloths, a shoebox with no label. I opened it. It was full of Brianna. Birthday cards she had made my mother in elementary school, crayon drawings, a report card from 1991 showing all A's with a note from the teacher in the margin. So proud of this young lady. Photographs that had not made it into the albums. Brianna at 2, at 4, at 6 in a Halloween costume, at 9 on a beach somewhere, squinting into the sun and laughing. A lock of hair in a tiny envelope with Brianna's name written in my mother's careful script. I went through the whole box. I went through it twice. Every item. Every year. Every small artifact of a child being witnessed and kept and considered worth preserving. I put the box back on the shelf. I sat down on the floor of the closet. The carpet was rough under me. The house was very quiet. I was not angry. I want to be clear about that. I sat there and I checked myself carefully, the way you check a wound to understand what you are dealing with, and what I found was not rage. What I found was something quieter and in some ways more final. It was the complete and total absence of surprise. I had known this in my body for 34 years. The box was simply the evidence. The paper trail. The physical confirmation of something I had understood since I was 6 years old, eating crackers in the dark while birthday streamers hung in the doorways. I sat on that floor for 11 minutes. I know because I looked at my phone when I sat down and looked at it again when I stood up. Then I stood up. I straightened my shirt. And I made a decision. Not a decision about revenge. Not a plan I had been building toward. Just a clear, quiet understanding about what I was going to do next and why. I was going to finish the work. 3 months after that Thanksgiving, Ground Level was selected for a prestigious national broadcasting honor. Our series on rural healthcare would be featured at the American Broadcast Institute's annual conference in Chicago, and I had been invited to deliver the keynote address. 400 people in that room. Journalists, producers, broadcasters, academics. The kind of room that, when you are in it, you understand has been watching your name for a while. I wrote the speech myself. I always write everything myself. I wrote it in 3 hours at my kitchen table at 2 in the morning, the way I write everything, fast and from the center of something true. The speech was about what it means to tell stories about people who believe their lives are not worth a story. About the particular and important work of finding the people who have been moving through the world as if they are background characters and saying, clearly on record, in front of whoever will listen, you were always the main character. You were never the footnote. I did not mention my mother. I did not mention the closet or the box or the birthday cards in my sister's name. I did not need to. The people in that room understood exactly what I was talking about. I could see it in their faces. The speech got a standing ovation. Not a polite one. The kind where people are on their feet before they have consciously decided to stand. Afterward, a woman came up to me. She was in her 60s, silver-haired, the kind of woman whose quiet carries authority. She introduced herself as the chair of the Institute's board. She shook my hand and held it for a moment, and she said, "Where did you learn to see people the way you do?" I thought about the answer for just a second. I learned what it felt like not to be seen, I said. I decided to make sure other people didn't have to learn it the same way. She nodded like she understood completely. She did. My mother called me 2 days after the conference. Someone had sent her a video clip of the speech. I still don't know who. A cousin, maybe. Someone who had seen it shared somewhere. She said, "I watched your speech." I said, "Okay." Long pause. She said, "You were talking about yourself, weren't you?" "Some of it." I said, "Most of it." The silence that followed was the longest silence we had ever shared on the phone. It stretched out between us like a road that neither of us was sure led anywhere safe. And then my mother said something I had not heard from her in 34 years of being her daughter. She said it in a voice I did not recognize. Not the church choir voice, not the casserole voice, not the put-together neighbor voice. A smaller voice. The voice of a woman standing in a closet looking at a box and finally understanding what was missing from it. She said, "I don't know why I didn't do better by you. I've been sitting here since I watched that speech trying to figure out why, and I don't have a good answer. I don't think there is one. I think I failed you. And I'm sorry. I'm genuinely sorry, Waverly." I sat with that for a moment. 34 years is a long time to wait for 4 words. I'm genuinely sorry. They did not fix anything. They did not give back the school photos in the junk drawer, or the graduation gown that was 2 inches short, or the party where I ate crackers in the dark, or the 11 minutes on a closet floor holding a box full of someone else's childhood. But they were real. I could hear that they were real. And real things, even when they arrive late, deserve to be received. "I know," I said. "I hear you." We talked for another hour. Longer than we had talked in years. Not about Brianna's lake house or Prescott's job or anyone else's anything. About me. About my work. About the stories I had spent 16 years telling and why they mattered. She asked questions. Actual questions. She listened to the answers. When we hung up, I sat at my desk in the dark for a while. The city outside was doing what cities do at 10 at night, noise and light, and the steady hum of lives running parallel to mine. I opened my notebook. The 4th one. I turned to the last entry, the Peabody Award, 18 months ago. I wrote the date, and then I wrote. She called. She asked. She listened. First time. 34 years. Better late than never, but late. That part is also true. Both things can be true. I closed the notebook. I put it on the shelf next to the other 3. Then I opened my laptop and got back to work. Because the work was always there and the work was always mine and no one. Not a mother who kept the wrong name in her shoebox. Not a family that talked over my accomplishments at graduation lunch. Not a single person who had ever looked at me and calculated that I was not worth the full price of their attention had ever been able to touch it. That was mine. It had always been mine. And it always would be. Being overlooked is not proof that you're small. It is proof that the people looking were not paying close enough attention. The work you do in silence, the notebooks you fill, the receipts you keep of your own life, those are yours. No one can open a box one day and find them missing. Because you put them there yourself. Was there someone in your life, a parent, a sibling, anyone, who never saw what you were building until it was already built? How did it feel when they finally noticed? Tell me below. Every single comment gets read.